Thank you. Somebody's recording. I forgot to record. Thank you.
Hi, Prof. Hi, Prof. I still haven't seen the model answer on my Sakai.
Oh, yes. So Mpumelelo hasn't seen a model answer. Does that apply to everybody?
Same here. I haven't as well.
I haven't seen it either.
Same here.
Neither have I, Professor.
I also haven't seen it.
So it's under announcement, but there's no attachment.
Ha! No attachment.
Yes, it just says
Okay.
model answer. Yeah.
So who is your lecturer that's telling you there's this and that and there's no attachment? Well, I'm sorry. Okay, I'll try again. Hopefully, I'll succeed this time. Third time round. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Then I guess I'll ask the question next time again. But I can ask the question, do you want a modular answer? Let's say I succeed. Let's assume I actually succeed in putting it up and for everybody to get. Would you then want me to do the same for our last assignment, the one on eat to live or live to eat? Okay, I guess not.
Yes, that would be helpful.
That would, okay, you would want. So that, you know, I would have liked you to have some experience with it before asking this question, whether I should do it again. But since you don't have the experience through my fault, I'll ask you the question next week, by which time you would have had experience with 2 model answers. Then, just in terms of your answers, I mean, most of you did answer saying that well, we tend to eat to live rather than live to eat. But some argued or answered differently that we live to eat. But those, either way, even a minority view, were argued, and this is what I'm looking for. And it's not the, you know, this answer correct or that answer correct. It is, what is your argument in whatever answer that you're making? And I saw some very bold attempts at that. But I think, you know, if you're asking that question, you know, do we eat to live or live to eat? It's firstly, understand that it's meant metaphorically. Some have taken it a bit too literally, because it's not just do we eat to live, but it's also, do we breathe? You could also say, you know, we could also be asking, do we breathe to live? Do we drink to live? Do we sleep to live? Now, all of these functions are necessary for life. But I'm not really, you know, I'm not to, you know, again, not taking it literally to mean that are we living to eat? Is that all, you know, is it just about eating? But rather, and that was implied by the second part of the question, how does that, because it relates, you know, our manner of looking at this relates how we're doing economic theory to a degree. And so if you have a question like, do we eat to live? You're looking at things like the purpose, you know, what is the purpose of what we are doing? And so we could be saying, you know, do we eat for its own sake? Yeah, sometimes I guess we do eat for its own sake, because, you know, we just want that nice food. You know, this is one of our privileges of living in this type of century, compared to other periods in time. So yes, sometimes we eat for its own pleasure, but more often than not, we eat because That's just what it's required for us to sustain. Our life isn't about the eating, even though what you see, this is the thing. What do you actually see human beings doing? Actually seeing what they are doing is you see them eating, sleeping, drinking, shopping, walking, and what have you. But is that all that they are doing? Is that what we are doing? Or because it's really the thing that the question that we are concerned with in economics is not just what, but also why. Or maybe that is the question to begin with. Should we be interested in the question of why do people do what they are doing? And when it comes to the why, you can't see it. You can only see what people are doing. You can't see why they're doing. And so a question like the one I've given you, sort of plays with that distinction between the what and the why. I can see what we're doing. We're eating. Are we eating for its own sake? Well, if you are of the belief that we are individuals, that human beings are without purpose, then you'd probably say, well, this is just that's what the animals do. That's just what they do. You're not going to ask the animal, are you eating for its own sake, or are you eating for something else? It's very often the sort of question that I've given you here deals with this idea of what is the purpose of what we're doing. And so if you get to hear a question, do you eat to live, you are in a sense you are posing the question which is very Aristotelian in terms of the final course. What is the purpose? And many of the answers were along the lines of, what is the purpose of mankind? What is the purpose of the human being? It's the good life. It's happiness. One of you called it eudaimonia. Some of you have gone back and read some Aristotle, and some have read about the realism and engaged with the four courses. So that's why I say that was really brilliant. So it's looking at the final course, if you like. And it's making us aware of thinking of questions like this, or when you come across questions like this, they are in a sense Aristotelian, and as we'll see later, they're not really what modern economics is too interested in. When it comes to what in economics today, if somebody were to ask, if you were to ask somebody, why are you doing what you're doing? What answer? Well, certainly if that person has been trained in economics, what answer would you get? Or what answer would, if somebody, you're an outsider, you're watching somebody do certain actions, you're going to go to an economist and you're going to ask the economist, can you tell me why this person is doing what that person is doing? What would the answer be?
To maximize utility.
To maximize utility, okay. Now that would have been something totally foreign in the vocabulary a few hundred years ago, why people do what they're doing. Well, they would have said, what would they have been saying more likely than saying, I'm doing this to maximize utility? What would have been more likely to say?
They would have said that they doing it for the purposes of what is natural for human beings.
Okay. Well, yes. I mean that in a sense would you see we're already too influenced by what we've been reading, Aristotle and the like. But I don't think any of us would have said, before you had training in economics, if let's say you're a child or a teenager, and they're asking you, why are you doing what you're doing? You wouldn't have said, I'm doing this to maximize my utility. If you had said that, what would people say about you?
Crazy.
Crazy, that's right. Thank you. This guy's crazy. I mean, there you've got a 6-year-old saying he's doing this to maximize his utility. But I mean, so because that you know, a more natural answer would be another answer. Would be I'm doing this in order to do this and that. You know, I'm eating because I'm hungry. I'm water skiing because I enjoy doing it. Okay, so now we use the maximizing utility in the place of this. So we have got this notion of maximizing, which is now used is a placeholder for everything. But in the past we would also have answered it in terms of questions. I'm doing it because it's good for me. Okay. Thing is, okay, I'm doing something because it's good for me. Does that make sense? You know, is that an answer we could well give? And then the question is, okay, what if you actually do too much of it? You drink too much. You've got your last drink and you think you're doing it because it's good, but it's not good, because many of the things that we're doing are not good for us, are they? Any smoker here? Lift your hand. Anybody smokes? I'm impressed. Very good. You're not. There's one. Jacques is doing some smoking. Okay, I do occasionally. Is it good for you, Jacques? What does your mother say about your smoking?
Terrible and expensive. and illegal these days.
Wow, it's everything bad about it, right? He's still doing it. He's still doing it. It's not good for him to do it. He's still doing it. What if we were to ask the question differently? Is he maximizing his utility by smoking? Jacques, we can ask you. We don't have to talk on your behalf. Are you maximizing utility by smoking?
I actually don't know. I've never thought about smoking and utility value, but probably I would say yes, as it's my choice. I would maximize my own utility. That's my decision and thought. So I would say yes.
Right. Yes. He's honest. What if somebody got a comment there, Mpumelelo?
Oh yes, I would agree with Chad in saying that he is maximizing his utility, because smoking is one of his preferences that are in his indifference curve, so that maximizes his utility.
Right, we're thinking like Pareto in terms of curves, but what if we were now to say, what about somebody who is not smoking cigarettes and not smoking MJ and ganja, what have you, but actually taking hard drugs? Anybody taking hard drugs? Heroin, cocaine? Jacques, your hand is still up. No.
I had to lower that one very fastly.
That was not, you didn't want to say it's me. Okay, so what if somebody is taking drugs, hard drugs? Is that person, would we as economists, we look at them and say, this person, would we still say this person is maximizing his utility?
Yes, we would.
Who say that? Mpumelelo?
Yes,
We would. Any, you agree with him?
Well, personally, I don't agree with it, but from an economic perspective,
yeah, no, we get that. Yes.
I think it tends to correlate with a lot of disorders like bipolar disorder.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay.
Which would suggest it wasn't an original operation of utility.
Your line isn't the best, Jezri. Your line is a bit difficult. It's breaking. But what I gather is he's saying that it may be related to things like bipolar disorders, and it may therefore be the chemical structure in the brain is such that there is a particular need for it. And so, I mean, certainly, maybe we'll get a chance to look at that. If you look at the work of Gary Becker and Stigler, they've written an article in 1977. And in that article, the title of the article is De Gustibus non est disputantum. They have provided a sort of an economic explanation that those individuals who are dependent on drugs, who are addicts, that they, despite, they may ruin their life, they may eventually kill themselves. We will look at this and say, oh, well, that's not good at all. But they provide an economic theory that shows that what they're doing is maximizing their utility. Well, I'd have a lot to say about that, but I guess where I'm going with this little detour is that if an economist would be saying, I mean, just to summarize that, if I were to ask the question again, are you doing it, because it maximizes your utility? You got to say yes. Otherwise, if you were to say no, it's not maximizing my utility, then I would be saying, well, then why don't you do that which maximizes your utility? You'd be irrational in a sense. And so we are inclined to say that what we are doing is the best for us. Otherwise, we would not be doing it. Okay? We're doing what we're doing because it's the best for us. It maximizes our utility. And I wouldn't do it if it didn't maximize my utility. So it becomes type of tautological, if you like. But it certainly is miles apart from the sort of Aristotelian approach that looks at what is the purpose of it. Because if I ask you what's the purpose of taking drugs, when you initially took it, that purpose was very different from the purpose that you're taking it now, because by now you're addicted. At the beginning, you pursued a purpose, and now you just have to. Anyway, this is a detour, and it's really just talking about your answers to our little essay question. A difficulty that I found is your understanding of realism. Realism, in a sense, is more difficult to understand than nominalism, because when it comes to realism, there are so many different understandings of realism, and so many. There's more often than not in your answers, you take it simply. Realism is a form of to be realistic. But remember, the realism that we're looking at, yes, it's realistic to a degree, but it's more concerned with our understanding of what we say, our answer to the question, what are the universal terms? Like utility, because is there something called utility? Mpumelelo uses that expression, utility, or Jacques, or as if we know fully well what utility is, but from a nominalist perspective, it's nothing. It's just a metaphysical word, and you'll see that in the work of Pareto when he says, well, Pareto proceeds like Cesare is telling us to do. I think it was Cesare saying that. We're just talking about curves and mechanics. There's in economics, let's get rid of these metaphysical terms like metaphysics and just express it in terms of maximizing an objective function. And what all of this is leading up to say that, whereas my question that you answered was in terms of really about final causes, about our purposes. In modern economics, we are not too concerned about things like that. We're more concerned about sort of the quantitative things and the mathematics. But of course, there are different schools that, like the Austrian School of Economics, that emphasize the importance of purposes. All right, that in relation to your answers to the essays. Do you have any questions on this? Or that you want clarification on with regard to the question? All right, then. So what we're doing today, we're looking at, we've talked about the mercantilistic period last week, and people in retrospect, Adam Smith in particular was saying that intellectually speaking, from a point of view of giving us right policy and giving us sound economic theory, it was a bit of a flop. But we've. I still owe you. Okay, that should be your question. I still owe you your marks on that question on mercantilism, right? Yes, Mpumelelo.
I wanted to ask you in regards to the essays when you answer them. Things such as footnotes and so forth, should they be included, or would you recommend that we don't include such things and just answer it from the perspective of not having an essay that is probably structured to answer someone maybe that is in layman's terms, but to assume that you already know what we're speaking of, so that I don't have to define what is natural and what's unnatural and so forth. And I can just assume that, like, if you're reading it, you already know what it means.
Okay, well, I see two questions. First, the one on the footnotes. So I'm engaging with you not as academics, but as intelligent beings. So I don't want to go through the rigmarole of of bibliography and footnotes. No, I don't want you to answer with footnotes if we're talking about those short essays.
Okay.
I don't want you to give footnotes. Also for another reason, and that's the second part of your question. Because what was the second part of the question? Because it's really, this is what I will be testing and examining, that balance. When you've got an essay of 400 words on a topic like mercantilism and, or on a topic like natural law, let's take a, difficult subject on something like natural law. Let's say if I were to give you the task of writing an essay on natural law, and the essay must be 10,000 words long. Oh, well, you can go to town, okay? And yes, you can, you can write with footnotes and everything, because it's so many words. You can really pile everything in there. I can ask you to write a book on it, and you could write a book on it, and it's just going to be more complete. And what I'm testing in those short essays, what I'm testing even for your exam and your tests, I'm testing your discernment, if you like. Discernment, are you able to weigh things according to how important they are in relation to the question? So, you're giving me an answer, and in your answer, you're putting in 400 words, you're trying to put the most important things about natural law, the most important things about mercantilism in those 400 words. So you are making a judgment call all the time, non-stop, all the time. What is important? What should be in there? What should not be in there? And And you can only make a good judgment call on that if you know the subject well enough. Okay, so from your judgments that you're making, I can see how well you really know this. If you now so if you're writing about mercantilism and you are telling me, you know, you give me a list, there's for Hornig, he would have a list of 9 principles to be pursued in the mercantilistic period. But by the time he's finished with the 9 principles, the 400 words are up. So if one of you is giving me those 9 principles, let's say there is such a thing, may not be called principles, but it would now tell me that yes, you've given me a section on mercantilism, but you've made it all, you know, you've made it your answer, which means you've lost sight of what is the beautiful English expression? You've lost sight of the wood for the trees. You're just giving me the trees. You can't tell me anything about the forest. You're just talking about those 9 trees. And so your question about footnotes and the like is, I don't want footnotes because you can put anything into footnotes. I'm interested in if you don't think it's important enough to be in your text, don't put it in a footnote. Okay, I'm not talking about books. I'm not talking about articles. I'm talking about these short essays, and I'm talking about tests and exams. All right, does that long answer, is that an answer to your question, Mpulelelo?
Yes, that's fine, thanks.
Okay. Okay, so let's look. So we talked about mercantilism, and we're now looking at, and it's probably a useful way to talk about is just to refer to them not as mercantilists, but as pre-classical economic thinkers, because we've got this negative connotation with mercantilist theory, but the contributions made by Thomas Hobbes, William Petty, John Locke, Hume, even though they are at the time of mercantilism, the intellectual contributions are just so important, so crucial to the enterprise of economic thinking. And in the videos you would have already seen how some of the stuff, the way that we talk about things today, are already seen at the time of William Petty, for instance. You know, this statistical approach. And so we're looking at these contributors to the history of economic thought from that perspective, namely the individual things that have put in place that are important to our economic thinking. And we're starting with Thomas Hobbes. All right, so I expect that you would have watched the video on Thomas Hobbes. You may have already heard of Thomas Hobbes. And if I were to, and remember at some point I told you what we're doing, we're looking at superficially. You know, we don't have to know this in depth, but we just need to know the most crucial component. And what you will see, knowing the most crucial component, you know, a statement like, you cannot step into a river twice. Just remembering this, that gives us an idea of what we can then elaborate and say, what does it mean? And therefore, what does who was it? Can you remember the name of the person who said you cannot step in the river twice? Anybody remember?
Isn't it Heraclitus?
That was Heraclitus. Thank you very much. And so once you've got that statement, once you remember that about Heraclitus, you can effectively write an essay on Heraclitus. Okay, I assume you would be able to. It might not be 5 pages long, but you would probably, if I were to give you today the topic, write a 400-word essay on Heraclitus, the mere fact that, you know, he said this thing about not stepping in the river twice, elaborating on that, you're gonna have you're going to be able to write an essay on this. So the same with, let's do the same with Hobbes, Thomas Hobbes. What is the one statement that you think that you know about Thomas Hobbes that you knew before this course, or you got to know in watching the video, or in doing your reading in preparation for this? What is the one statement that we would associate with Thomas Hobbes?
I would say that life in the state of nature is nasty, poor, brutish, and short.
There you go. Okay. Life in the state of nature is nasty, brutish, and short. And it's amazing how much it will summarize. And knowing that little bit about what he says, and having, you know, these lectures and the readings as a background allows you now, you will see, it will allow you to write an essay. And quite a substantial essay too, once we're through with this. You know, since we're talking about these sorts of pithy expressions, what is the one statement about Descartes that you would forever associate, and most people would associate with René Descartes? What is the one that he's known for? Okay, it's in the videos. There were two really dealing with it.
I would say never accept anything as true until all reasons for doubt can be ruled out.
All right, that's a very good one. Yes, that is certainly one of them. That will be on top there. And knowing that statement, you've got a lot of information about his methodology, and having a lot of information about what he calls the method will now allow you to write an essay on why Descartes is important for economics. Okay, you can now say that he's starting with doubt. You know, he doesn't accept anything. He doesn't accept anything at face value, and unless he's engaged with it long enough to say it can be accepted. So because that's what we're doing in economics, isn't it? I mean, we at the end of the day, we don't accept anything. We want to see it in black and white, if possible, using data. You know, we'll be asking, what is your evidence for it? So that is one part of Descartes. There's another pithy statement that I'm thinking of, I'm looking for.
I think and therefore I am.
I think and therefore I am. Okay, we'll get to that later. And you know, it's not by accident that everybody remembers these ones, because you know they encapsulate so much of the thought and the thinking. And what about Adam Smith? What do we associate Adam Smith with?
Invisible hand.
Invisible hands. Okay. And really all that we are doing in this course on the history of economic thought, we're picking on some of those statements, we're dragging them out, and we make them comprehensible. And your skill will be that on the basis of the knowledge on top, you know, knowing about this pithy statement, you're going to be able to hang an entire essay, an entire exam onto that sort of statement. So for Hobbes, we've got that statement that says, in a state of nature, life will be nasty, brutish, and short. So what does Thomas Hobbes say? The first thing that we've got to take cognizance of, and that's of interest to us, is that Thomas Hobbes sees the human being, if you like, as an island. Okay, that we all individuals. He adopts, if you like, a very nominalistic perspective, in that he says that we are all just individuals. That's all we are. We're just humans, individuals. We're not even humans. We're just individuals. We're not part of a society. You know, I mean, that comes later. What he really does, he explains how society comes into existence from a state of nature, where in his view of it, this state of nature is not made up of a society, but only as individuals, right? Just individuals. And society is, if you like, a construct, something created, not something natural. Remember when we talked about Aristotle, questions usually are in terms of what, is it natural? What is the nature of the thing? And certainly Aristotle would be saying that society is something natural. This is the nature of humans, that we live in society, and that our happiness is made up of living in society. And this is, if we want to understand a human being, we've got to understand the human being to be a political animal. All right. And from your answers, I see some of you had done politics, and clearly in that book Politics, he presents the human being as a political animal, and Hobbes says that no, the human being is not a political animal. The human being is, in its state of nature, is just an individual, and society comes about because, we'll see, because human beings, even though they're just individuals, can act rationally, and the rational solution to a terrible situation, the rational solution is, if you like, making peace and creating society. Okay, so he is, if you like, one of the very early forms of a rational choice model. Okay, that's one reason why Hobbes is so important to us. He's giving us a rational choice model. We'll go through that in a moment. And it's a rational choice, not of society or the nature of human beings or what have you. It's a rational choice model based on the individual in a state of nature. So he's trying to explain, if we're only dealing with individuals that exist in isolation, not as political animals, but as isolated beings, how did we come from that state of nature to have, look at us now, look at us human beings. We're living in societies made up of not millions, but sometimes billions of people. And so he's got a type of rational choice model. We'll see how successful that rational choice model is. But you can see also that he sets himself up as, and we'll look at some of the statements clearly in opposition to Aristotle. And by the way, Descartes does something does that as well. So what does he mean when he says, in a state of nature, life will be nasty, brutish, and short? What is he saying? Somebody just elaborate on that.
I'm just going to take a jab at this one. I'm not sure if I'm on the right track, but is he not talking about the social contract as well? Where the order?
Yeah, he is. Okay, but that's before the state of nature. Sorry, hit me. The other way around, that's after the state of nature. Okay, so that's the end point that we've got to get to. How do we end up with having a society if our starting point is a state of nature where you've got, so your track is right, because that's where we want to end up, but we're still at the beginning point.
Okay.
I think that it's predicated on man's need for power and man's relative power with respect to other men.
Okay, I mean that was certainly the way it's been put in one of the videos. Power, yes, and in a sense that can be related to the title of his book. The most famous, again, if you've watched the video, what is the title of his most important book?
The Leviathan.
The Leviathan, okay, because now we'll see as we go along, by the Leviathan, he really means the subjugator of pride, because people are full of pride, and in a sense power is related to that pride. But now power is always about, what is power about? Okay, now firstly, what would an economist say about power? A neoclassical economist. Does it exist? What does a nominalist say about power? Can you measure it? Okay, it's a difficult concept. It's metaphysical.
I would say that it's for the purposes of obtaining market share in the markets.
Okay, but now so in other words, when we're talking about power, we're already talking about a situation where there are markets. Okay, markets can only exist in society. So again, that is something that comes later, because we're still in a state of nature. We need to step out of the state of nature that he's described. We stepping out in a sense of, what does it mean? What is at the heart of saying that in a state of nature, life will be nasty, brutish, and short? Just elaborate on that. Don't go too far away. Don't look too much at the end position. What does he, let's just grapple with that. What does it mean? What are the implications of a statement like that?
If I may try and get in, he's describing the life of mankind in a state of war. So how man would react, mankind would react in situations of a state of war.
Okay, who is talking? I don't know. I haven't worked out how to figure out who is talking.
Sean.
Sean.
Yep.
And your initials are S?
SH.
SH, okay, good day. Okay, state of war. Why state of war? Why would there be a state of war? In a state of nature. Why is a state of nature like a state of war?
Because everybody's ultimate interest is in their own survival.
Everybody's interest is in their own survival. And what is the expression that he uses for, your interest is in your own survival? Remember, he is saying, that's the starting point, okay? The starting point is starting off saying that I'm going to chuck out Aristotle. The individual there's no society, there's only a state of nature. And in a state of nature, every individual exists in independence. Is just that bare individual discernible. There's no such thing as a society, just that bare individual. And so survival becomes the utmost in that state of nature. I mean, it's like, well, I guess the book was written much later. What was the famous book by the author, Robinson Crusoe? I mean, you're stranded on an island, you just got to survive. And so now the concern of the individual is for his survival. What he doesn't use so much the word, or more often he uses an expression somewhat different from that of survival. What is the expression that he's using?
Is it maybe appetites and aversions?
Well, we're going to read about that in a moment. Appetites and aversions, yes. I mean, because that's what he uses. That's the expression that he uses, appetites and aversions, when he talks in relation to what is good and what is bad. I mean, what is good? What is bad? He says, well, it's all subjective. Okay, and that's why he's important for economics as well, because these things become all very subjective. That which is good is simply that which you have an appetite for, and that which is bad is simply that which you have an aversion for. And he uses that, and of course, these appetites and aversions are geared towards, in a sense, he would be saying they're geared to something else, an expression that I'm looking for.
Isn't it self-preservation?
Thank you. It's self-preservation, okay? In a state of nature, what you're going to do? You know, you imagine you're thrown onto this earth, you don't know people, you don't have language. Why don't you have language in a state of nature?
Because you're only an individual?
You're only an individual. And language presupposes society. I mean, we share a language, but if you're an individual and you're not sharing any living space with other beings, maybe you've developed your own language in your mind. I don't know, but you don't have language because you don't have society, and so you're thrown on Earth, and you're an individual. You don't have language. You don't know people. You just as an individual. What are you going to do? Your instincts. Okay, those are instincts, and certainly when we talk about Aquinas, when he talks about the nature of the human being and natural law, he would certainly say, acknowledge that, yes, we have instincts as human beings, and our instinct is like the first step of the natural law. Our instinct is towards self-preservation. But now, Hobbes uses that idea of self-preservation of the individual trying to survive, to achieve self-preservation. Now, in spinning that out and seeing how that leads to the establishment of society. And so, if we are only concerned with self-preservation, he sort of creates this idea that well, it leads to a state of war, because as we are seeking self-preservation, if that is your principle, then the other human being that you may encounter may be an obstacle towards self-preservation. Maybe an obstacle because he's in danger. That other person may be a danger. He might want to kill that person for whatever reason, or there is scarce resources, and because there's a scarcity in resources, if one person takes that food, that may just mean that therefore there's not enough food for yourself, and therefore you rather go and eliminate this other person so that you can access this food. Do you know? I mean, if those who watch rugby would know that the rugby players in Fiji, in New Zealand, they're very big and very strong, and it's got to do with this idea of self-preservation. I mean, that's an example that Hobbes could use, because the indigenous inhabitants of New Zealand, the Maori, when they got there, what is that, maybe 3,000-4,000 years ago, to that island, their main food staple were those big flying birds, but they had worked out a way of how to kill those flying. They were very large and very easy prey, and so what happened is that after many generations of living in New Zealand on this island, where there's a lot of snow, a lot of mountains, and food, there isn't much in terms of vegetarian food, and so their main source of food were those birds, those big flying birds. But those big flying birds and their nests and their eggs were easy prey, and it reached a point where there just wasn't enough food going around, because those birds were facing extinction. And so so it led to a situation where only the really the strongest and fittest would, it reminds us of the survival of the fittest, as per Charles Darwin's theory. And so basically, only the strongest and the strongest would survive. In self-preservation, and that's why they're so warlike, because they lived under those conditions of self-preservation, and only the strongest and fittest survived, if you like. And that's why these guys are so strong and so warrior-like. Okay, so it's like, this is what Thomas Hobbes had in mind when he's talking about this, the state of nature, that there's this war of, and so we've got that expression that comes in handy for our discussion of Thomas Hobbes. It's the expression of war of all against all. And why shouldn't be the war of all against all? And so in a state of nature, life will be nasty, brutish, and short, because chances of you dying are very high, dying at an early age are very high. Okay, so how does he use that now to come to society, to achieve society? Well, what, if we think of this in retrospect, we're looking at this and say, well, is that a good solution to have, to die early? It's not a good solution for anybody. It may be a reality, but it's not a good solution. And he says, even though human beings in a state of nature are concerned about their self-preservation, what they do have, according to him, they've got rationality. They are rational. Human beings are rational. And so each human being will look at this and say, well, in this state of nature, I'm bound to be a casualty at a young age. So it would make sense, talking about rationality, to find a solution to this particular problem. And the solution to that particular problem is the social contract, which was mentioned by, I can't quite exactly remember who, that it is rational for human beings who are in this state of nature somehow to get together and to agree to give up some of their natural, what they've got in a state of nature. We have the natural right to self-preservation. Okay, it is rational to give up some of those natural rights in exchange for protection, in exchange for peace, in exchange for giving that up, in exchange for cooperating with people. Because as we give up some of those natural rights, the natural right is that of self-preservation, as we're willing to give that up, because, or when, that can extend our lifespan. Okay, so it's reasonable, it's rational to give up some of our natural rights. And so his first natural law, if you like, he called it the natural law, is the natural law of that really what we led to attain, or what we led to seek, is peace. All right, because if we can attain peace, then we're able to live longer, and that is a better rational solution than dying early. And so what he proposes in that Leviathan, in that book Leviathan, is that it is rational for us to give up some of our natural rights towards self-preservation, because it can extend our life. So it is rational for us to get together with other human beings and form, and that's where the social contract comes in. It's rational for us to form a social contract. And in that social contract, we're giving up some of our natural rights. We're giving up our, in terms of natural rights, you are in a state of nature, That's a state of nature. You've got the natural right of self-preservation. If it means self-preservation, you've got to kill somebody in order to get food, well, then so be it. But now in a social contract, you're giving up that ability or that right to kill somebody in exchange, because you don't want to, you don't want to get killed by other people. So likewise, you've got to give up your right to killing others. And so that will form the basis of our social contracts. Any questions up to this point? Right, so the social contract, therefore, is a rational solution to, let's call it the zero-sum game that we see in a state of nature. And it's really, so what does he say, and why is that of interest to us from an economic perspective? Well, it's of interest to us because he takes as a starting point, self-preservation is really something similar to what? It's similar to self-interest. We are, later we've got developed good economic theory that explains various institutions, such as the law, or institutions such as the firm, as a rational choice solution to a particular economic problems. In the same way, we've got this here as a rational choice by a self-seeking individual living in isolation to actually come together with others and form a society. So that is of interest to us as well, because now we see society not as something natural. For Aristotle, society is something natural, but in the hands of Hobbes, society becomes something created by human beings. So our natural state is not to live in society. No, that is a human convention, if you like. It's a human artifice. It's not something natural. And then, of course, the moment you start looking at society as an artifice rather than as something natural, your entire view of how you look at this, how you look at society, becomes entirely different. Because even if we talk about it in terms of the four causes of Aristotle, everything that is man-made is easy for us to control and understand. If you're making a hammer, the hammer is an artifice. You can explain in terms of the four causes what the artifice is. You can explain it. You've made the hammer. Its purpose is, its final cause is to drive nails. Its form, it's a tool, and it particularly a tool that to drive nails. And in a sense, there's a correlation between the final cause and the formal cause. So anything that is man-made is easy for us to deal with in terms of our thinking about it, because it's not natural. Anything that's natural. What if life? Can you give me a definition of life? Anybody willing to give me a definition of life? It's just difficult to give a definition of life because it's natural. Okay, it's something natural. It's out of our control. It's there. It happens. And so if you take the Aristotelian approach to society, and you look at society as something that exists by nature, it's part of human nature, then it is, in a sense, more difficult to deal with the idea of society than it is to talk about society as being nothing but a contract. Okay? Isn't that what Hobbes is saying? Society is just a contract, and we've given a rational choice explanation why people are willing to engage in that particular contract. Any questions here? Of course, it's got its difficulties, because if you're starting, maybe there's a bit of a fraud in this way in this argument, because we're saying, human beings get together and they reach an agreement, and they've got the terms of contract, the social contract, and they're able to arrive at that social contract because they do have reason, because they are rational. But in order to have a contract, you need to have what? What do you need to have in order to even have a contract with somebody?
Language?
You need to have language. As a starting point, you need to have language. If you don't have language to begin with, how can you have a contract? But what does he say about language? Language doesn't exist. It doesn't exist unless you've already got a society. So in a sense, I think the expression there would be he's begging the question, or he is assuming what he sets out to prove, because language is the effect of society. But now he's using that which is the effect as part of the causes to create the society. So there is a problem in his argument, but we'll get back to that later. But so now we've got Thomas Hobbes moving through a rational choice argument, if you like, to arriving at society. And what he imagines, and that is of course where Hobbes is important to politicians and where he's important to us, what he imagines is an all-powerful Leviathan. We are giving up our rights to the powerful state. We don't have the liberal situation where you've got you really don't want an all-powerful state. We've got someone who says that you need to have an all-powerful state, because and the idea of the Leviathan is that this is the all-powerful state. Anybody know where Leviathan comes from, that expression?
I think it comes from the Bible.
Comes from the Bible?
Yes,
correct.
Sorry?
In which book?
I've read in the book of Job and Psalms.
All right. Yeah. So that's the Old Testament. That's the old Jewish Tanakh. And the Leviathan is the sea monster that emerges, but it's symbolic for he's referred to the Leviathan is referred to as the tamer of pride, the king of people of pride, because that's what we are. We've got a lot of pride, each in the more so in this age. Nobody wants to be told what to do and what not to do. I mean, what is our most precious thing? In your life, what is your most precious thing? What do you really value?
My will.
Hey man, very good. Your will. That's your most precious thing. Your will is your most precious thing. Okay? Your will is your most precious thing. You don't want to be told what you should be doing. You like to be your own boss. Okay? That's why we go and study, to be our own bosses, if you like. Our will is so precious. This is the last thing we want to give up. And why not? Because we're full of pride. Isn't our whole society saying that, don't be humble. Don't be humble, become something. Achieve something. You can become whatever you want to be. And so that's what we're doing. We're running around trying to live our will. And that's why economics likes, that, and that all of economics is really engaging in that, isn't it? Because we don't know what you're doing. We don't know why you're taking drugs. You say, we got an economic theory that says that, well, you're maximizing utility by taking drugs. But you also, one thing that we acknowledge in that, even though we don't know why you're doing it because that is your will. even if you're destroying yourself, you're pursuing your will. And so the will is our most precious commodity. And you will, and so the Leviathan is one way, you know, that all-powerful state is able to control the pride and the will of people, because and that's why he consciously titled it the Leviathan, because the Leviathan is the conqueror of will, of pride, and you need to conquer pride in order to have peace in society. Because, you know, if you're pursuing your own, you own pride, you're a prideful person, then look at, you know, if you ever watch movies on Hitler and people like that, you wouldn't be able to contradict him. It was all about him. He didn't care a bit about German nation. It was just about him. And the entire German nation was simply there to do his bidding. And you know what? Before he died, you know what he said? He said, the German nation didn't deserve him. They didn't deserve him. And that's why he didn't care to ruin that nation. And he sacrificed it. He could have made peace long before Berlin was destroyed and Germany destroyed. No, but he was willing to sacrifice that German nation because of his pride. And so pride is a very important thing in what, you know, and so Hobbes discerned that. And so that's why he called it the Leviathan. And so he's saying that what we ought to have is a Leviathan, an all-powerful state. So let's stop on Hobbes at this point. Any questions regarding to Hobbes? What I've said so far, or anything that you want to add to it? So just have yes, Mpumelelo.
I wanted to ask, what is exactly meant by Hobbes's theory of motion as it relates to natural law? Because it seems as if he's saying that fundamentally human beings are in a state of flux that is ever changing. So I want to know what is his theory of motion and how it relates to natural law.
Okay, well, let's do that. Okay, do you see all of that? Do you all see that? What's on the screen now? What is on the screen?
No.
You don't see? Okay. No. How do I? Okay, hold on. I got to learn this, okay? Apparently I can share. Oh, okay. Can you see that now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so that is let's have a look briefly at the book itself, the Leviathan. On my side, it's flickering very badly. And let's see if we can answer some of those questions with regard to that. Okay, I went through this trying to find some highlights for you. Let's look at this first. This, and is there a way that I can circle? Does it flicker on your screens as well, the way it does on my screen?
Okay, not for me, no.
Okay, so just for me. Let's look at some of the book here. For true and false, okay, if you see a statement like this, for true and false attributes of speech, not things, what would you know? Is he, in terms of nominalism and realism, is he a nominalist or a realist? Okay, we'll get back to that.
The realist.
Let's get back to that. Okay, let's just look at some of these quotations and work through that and get to the answer. Let's look at what what he says here. And therefore, in geometry, why does he talk about geometry? He talks about geometry because, you know, having encountered the work of, at the age of 40, having encountered the work of Euclidean geometry, he thought, this is fantastic stuff, this geometry, because in geometry, there is no disagreement. We've got exact proofs. And so he writes here, in this here, and therefore, in geometry, which is the only science that pleased God to bestow, basically everything else is not science, only geometry science, men begin at settling the significations. By significations, he talks about meaning, the meaning of their words. And they call those the definition. So, and place them at the beginning of their reckoning. This is what we do in economics. You know, we start off, so we say, okay, you know, we're not going to spend time defining the competition in sense what it really is, but we're looking at competition. We define it at the beginning of our analysis, and we define it at the beginning of our analysis, and then once we've defined the terms the way that we want to define them, then truth, this portion here, what is true and false is really about using the words correctly. It's not about things, okay? And then he condemns, and then at the bottom here, for words are wise counters by those who reckon by them. By reckoning, he understands, using it like mathematical tools, if you like, adding and subtracting. And for those are fools who follow the authority of Aristotle or Thomas Aquinas or any other doctor, whosoever. So you know, I mean, he's saying that if you, let's not proceed like Aristotle does by getting at the definition of something, the definition of a thing, if you like, through long analysis. No, that later he calls it metaphysics. Okay, here reasoning is nothing but reckoning, adding and subtracting of general names agreed on. He's saying that society, you know, remember society, he talks about society is something agreed on. And so the same with words, you know, society is no different from the words, the language that we're using. It's also just artificial, something agreed on. And reasoning is simply being able to work with these things agreed on artificially. And, you know, I may give you some more. No, that's not an interesting one. Okay, here we've got beginning to find what Mpumelelo talks about. Perpetual desire for power. Okay. For a general inclination of all mankind is the desire for power. Now, what I'm doing this. Are there any? No, we talked about the nature and the like. So what I want to, and the self-preservation, that's all coming later. Okay, we don't have too much time to go through this in detail. So in answer to what you're saying, if we go to that first quotation, if you like. For the second. If you look at, if you want to inquire what he says about motion, you got to realize that he's taking an approach that would be more like Heraclitus, and he's not to answer the question I posed earlier. he would not be a realist, he's a nominalist, because he's saying that we make up those words and we agree to them. There's nothing that corresponds to the universal term. We just agree to use we just agree to use the words in a certain way. And that marks him out as a nominalist. And so when it comes to things like motion, it's really that motion is all there is, because you don't have a nature of things. Remember, he condemns this talk about Aristotelian talk that is foolish. It doesn't exist. And so all there is is motion and movement all the time, like Heraclitus would be saying. And if we are trying to, and that's what science is supposed to do, it's trying to in a sense to put a circle around things. He talks about mankind. He talks about mankind rather than human nature, because all you have are individuals. There's just our theorizing, in a sense, is artificial, because we're not talking about the nature of things. We are talking about our use of words, and so if we were to proceed looking at his idea of notion, it will be related to his philosophical perspective, which we're given here in terms of a type of nominalism. Okay, I find this, sorry, disturbing, because it's been flickering all the time in my face. Are you still there? Everybody still there? All right, so that was an attempt at answering your question in terms of when you're looking, I can't tell you exactly what does he say about motion. Can you sort of add more to that? But it will be, from what I recall, when you want to think about him and what he talks about, whatever the topic is, motion, you got to remember that he is coming from a very nominalist perspective, where all of these things, the words that we're using, society that exists, or the only thing that is in existence is just individuals that are in continuous motion, okay? And our attempt to deal with it intellectually is something created, is basically artificial. And that is the entry point into understanding Hobbes, whatever the topic is, motion or all that we have is motion, and our intellectual attempt to get to grips with it is a matter of agreeing on the right use of words, agreeing on what we understand by the words that we are using. Does that answer your question to a degree?
Yes, it does to a certain degree.
Now, for the sake of time, let's just move very quickly. Petty, there's a video up on Petty, William Petty. He was the assistant to Hobbes for many years, and Petty was called the most rational man, right? Who gave us the presentation on Petty?
I gave the presentation on Petty. Roy.
Roy, you did. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. Why was he called the most rational man?
So William Petty was called the most rational man because he used number to define different things. So he would define wealth based on number. So he'd use statistics to get more accuracy out of measurements.
Okay, so and so everybody can see how important that William Petty is, because it is this attempt to quantify everything. And I mean, he was strongly influenced by somebody who is considered the father of statistics, William Grant. And William Grant was doing pretty much what we do these days. Nowadays, apparently, if you want to find out how many people, where is the coronavirus, these days? Where is it spreading the fastest? They're collecting samples of water by the sewage, and where it comes sewage, and from that they can see the burden of the virus in this area, and so this is where it's got to be. In a sense, Grant was doing something similar. If you want to know something about the size, the population of a city, well, go and look how many people die on a daily basis. You don't have to go and count every individual. You go and you look at who's dying and what they're dying of, and that gives you an indication of the number of people living there, what the age group of the people, and so on. So that's statistics. William Petty did something similar in Ireland. So I want you to look at that video by William Petty. Karl Marx called Petty the father of economics. He revived him after having gone into obscurity. He revived interest in Petty because he thought, well, there's really a beginning of our economics, and we can see how how this relates to how this is like the natural evolution of starting with Hobbes. Everything, society doesn't exist. All that exists are individuals, and so if all that exists are individuals, you're not talking about the nature of society or the nature of individuals. You're just talking about individuals that bobbing in and out of each other's environment, if you like. And so one way to deal with this artifice called society is simply not looking at the nature of society or the nature of human beings, but just dealing with them statistically. How many are they? He might also, very appropriately be called very rational being because he made himself one of the wealthiest men in England and Ireland, because as the it's an interesting story about William Petty. We don't have too much time to talk about that, but he was tasked when England conquered Ireland. He was the Surveyor General, and being the Surveyor General, he was the person now responsible for the redistribution of land of the Irish. Anybody Irish here? Any Irish here? No Irish? Okay, the Irish were all Catholics, and so the English conquerors wanted the Irish to become Protestant, and those who didn't agree to become Protestant, well, their property was taken. And William Petty had the good fortune to be responsible for that process, because I can tell you, any land that wasn't clearly defined in terms of who had ownership over it, who do you think became the owner of the land?
William Petty.
William Petty. Who answered there? Who was that, Roy? Was it Roy? William Petty became the owner. So it was very rational from that perspective as well. If there's a land and nobody claims ownership, well, it's going to become my land. And then many of the British soldiers who were allocated land, they didn't know what to do with it. So he offered them a pittance for that land, and it became his land. And he became the biggest landlord in all of Ireland. He spent the rest of his life fighting legal cases. Surprise, surprise, not really. Okay. But talk about land appropriation. Wasn't Mugabe who invented that? We've got an example set by William Petty, and William Petty, certainly from that perspective, was very rational, because that's all he cared about all his life, his own self-interest. You'll see that in a bit of the biography that we're given there. It was all about himself. So he was certainly the most rational, self-interested individual you could possibly think of. So despite all the handicaps he had, having been orphaned, basically blind, despite being blind, he was able to become can you believe that? You wouldn't want to be his patient, but he was a surgeon. But who cares? Whatever he does, it was just for his interest. At some point, he was a he was also professor of music, or the head of the College of Music, and on and on and on. It was just about himself. Okay, so very classical, rational human being. And he was literally an example of living to eat. He was just living to maximize his own. Well, sorry, that's not what I wanted. We could contrast him. Are we still sharing? Can you see me? What do you see on your screens?
You're
seeing me? Okay.
You've
great.
just stopped sharing, yes.
Okay, so I was sharing all along. I'm sorry about that. I don't know what you saw, whatever it was. But so now you're seeing me on the screen. There was no need not to see me. But let's move on to Locke, John Locke. John Locke, famous for the expression law, liberty, and property. That was his slogan, as we've had this on the exchange on the WhatsApp group. He was an important role, his theory of property, important role in and his classical, this is really at the heart of classical liberalism. But in a sense, John Locke is really, both important to Marxist thought as it is to classical liberal thought. We'll see in a moment why he's important to Marxist thought, but he's more the cornerstone of classical liberalism, and the American Declaration of Independence talks about life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. John Locke said that, and he is very important because of his theory of property. He said that, at the time of Thomas Hobbes, because of what he said, now we look at Thomas and Hobbes and we say this guy's got a fantastic model here, hasn't he? He's got a rational choice theory as to why there is society. Bingo, so he's important, and we've got no problems with that. But at the time, at Hobbes's own time, he was referred to as the monster of Malmesbury, because he came up with this very attenuated and evil view of human nature and humanity and how society comes into existence. So even though Locke is clearly in the tradition of Hobbes, he never wanted to acknowledge that he had this affinity with the work of Hobbes. But what John Locke said is that, well, it's one thing to talk about self-preservation. What you need more than anything else, you need the means for self-preservation. And the means for self-preservation is what? What is the most important thing that for your survival?
Land?
Well, in a sense, land or the fruit of lands. Okay, you need to be able to consume food. Only if you have that, or the land that's giving you the means for self-preservation, only then can society and survival of society, the individuals in that society, if you like, be secured. So he now shifts the debate and looks at the means for self-preservation. If you are, the clearest example of having the means of self-preservation is if you bend down and if you pick up an apple and you consume that apple, well, once it's going down your gullet, nobody can take it away from you, right? So that is the moment you add labor to, let's say, to the land, then in a sense, it is becoming your property in a way that the moment you are taking an apple from the land and you're consuming it, this is now property without dispute, because it's already going down your gullet, and so nobody can really reclaim it. And so he takes property, the labor that you add to anything, what makes it your property. And that is that portion of John Locke that the Marxists, of course, take to, namely that you're mixing labor to it, and that is what makes you property. But for Locke, for the liberal scholars who follow Locke, he is of more interest because he's of interest because he's now saying that you are using you're turning that into property, because it becomes property by virtue of the labor that you put to, by virtue of the labor that you put to it. And that then is your property. And what he does, he says, well, firstly, we look at Locke by saying that, is there a limit to the amount of property that you can have? Is there a limit to it? And he says that when it comes to things that can perish, like apples, like tomatoes, like vegetables, things that grow, they can perish. It doesn't make sense that you should accumulate, just take everything for yourself, because it just leads to wastage. So there's a natural limit to your accumulation with regards to things that can perish. But when it comes to, and that's when he talks about society, he says society hasn't got those natural limits, because society, to the degree that society has developed a thing called money. Can money perish? It cannot perish. So even though there are natural limits to the accumulation of perishable goods, there are no natural limits in a society that uses money. There's no limit to accumulation, because money doesn't perish, and land doesn't perish. And what he proposes is that all land should become property of somebody. And that was at the time when in England they've had the enclosure movement. The enclosure movement was that a lot of land in England, in Great Britain, was common property. Well, not the land that had become the property of William Petty, but William Petty became rich because many areas, it wasn't really clear who owned the land. It was really common land. And so Locke proposed that we should have an enclosure movement where all land becomes private property. And so that was a time when many people were driven off the land, because property that was common property became property mostly of the nobility, the most powerful people. And so, yeah, you had a lot of poverty at the time. Locke said that's a good thing. It doesn't matter. That's a great thing, because, again, using this idea of the natural state, and that was very fashionable in England. These were the colonial periods, where the English had the American colony, and Locke would be saying, look there in other state of nature in the Americas, you've got the Indians, and these Indians, even the king there, even the biggest chief, lives in a very rudimentary manner, very often nomadic, living in tents, no luxuries like the English. And he, with that pompousness, he said that, on the other hand, here in England, in the society that we've been able to create, based, if you like, and I'll have to explain that, on his theories of property, you've got even the lowest worker living better than a king in America, because the lowest worker would have a bed which an American chief didn't have. He would have food which was available easily. He didn't have to go out and hunt it all the time. And so he talked about the state of nature compared to the society that was being created artificially through the means that Hobbes was talking about. But in this artificial state of social contract, so he was a contractarian as well, you've got a situation where even the lowest paid worker lived better than a king in a state of nature in the Americas. And what he said was he divided society, and that's why he becomes so important for economic theory, for those who argue in favor of private property. He said that the society is made up of two types of people: the lazy and slothful and irrational on the one hand, those street bums who walk the world, and you've got the industrious and rational. And he said that, well, the industrious and irrational are pursuing unlimited accumulation, are pursuing accumulation. They want to accumulate property, and that is a good thing. And it's a good thing to turn common property into private property, because what the result that we're getting is that the rational and industrious are getting the lazy and the slothful and irrational to work, because the means of subsistence on common land is being removed, and they're forced to live for the rational and industrious. And in this manner, we've got a mechanism in place which puts everybody to work. If you now, and this is what happened in South Africa as well, isn't it? When the colonial, the Dutch, and later especially the English came to South Africa, they raised a tax on the societies living there. The chiefs had to collect those taxes, and it was usually taxes in the form of what was it? You had to pay a tax per opening of the dwelling, and that was a means to put to labor. You'd now have people living in South Africa would now be forced to start working for the colonial enterprises because they had to pay tax. And how do you get money to pay tax? Well, you got to go and work on the mines. So we've got the model, the principle, the ideology of Locke at work in South Africa as well. And it's really the ideology that you're forced to work through private property. But you know what? It's not something that you should condemn. It's something that you should praise and eulogize, because it is putting everybody to work, and through the means of private property, and everybody at work is now ensuring that there will be an increasing standard of living for all the world, for all the society in South Africa, in England, where even through this private property system, you now have everybody having to work, and their standard of living becoming more and more like that of people in England, where you've got the rising private property. Can you see how important Locke is in this theory of property is in this, and what role it plays in? It also plays a role in our progression of the history of economic thought, because he is now proposing a mechanism, talking about a mechanism that really leads to the wealth of nation. Okay, that once you create these private properties and you force everybody now to live according to that, and to try and accumulate, to be part of this rat race, if you like, it is leading to an increasing wealth of nation. And it's like a mechanism that we will look at more detail when we get to Adam Smith. But he's put forth a mechanism which is leading to greater prosperity. And when we, that's one of the examples, that when we talk about Adam Smith not having necessarily had anything novel to say, or whatever he was saying was already in circulation at the time. This is an example. We are thinking of the work of John Locke, who has identified this mechanism at place by dividing society into the rational and the irrational and industrious. Property owner, accumulate. Who is it that he's talking about? He's talking about the capitalist, if you like, the land owning classes that are providing employment opportunities, those who do not have the means of production or even the land. But you know what? It doesn't matter. It is good for society, and if we follow this particular model, then we will have a more prosperous society. Just look at the English situation compared to the Americas of the time. Man, I ran through this so quickly. I got to apologize, but we're recording this so you can follow it more slowly. I've left out a number of steps. But you got any questions regarding the theory of property of John Locke? Well, that's very good. I'm sure that you're rational human beings and you don't want this to carry on for too long, because we're doing what I didn't want to do. We're getting very close towards 8 o'clock. And last time, you know, you were now, okay, this is enough. So we're going to put a stop to this, right? Okay. At least to the content of today's lecture. So what I want to do, as I told you, I want you to answer, you know, I'm going to give you 10 minutes to write some thoughts down and to send me answers to the question that I'm going to be putting up in a moment. Now, when I put up those questions, they look pretty intimidating, but don't be scared. You know, I'm not gonna be punishing you on marks, you know, being very strict on it. Really, I mean, I'm rather than wanting to see how much you understand it, whatever you're gonna answer me, I'm gonna take that a reflection on how well I've been able to explain the thinking of Hobbes and the thinking of Locke. And what you're really doing is, you know, I'm hoping that you can remember some of the stuff that I was saying. But even if you can't remember much, you know, whatever you remember, put it down. And what I'm proposing is that once you've put it down, it can be in any format. You can put it on your computer screen. You can do it handwriting. But I hope that you're going to be able to take a photograph of what you've written and send that to me, or send it to me by email. The thing is, I don't want exchange between students to take place, so I'm just giving you 10 minutes to do that. Does that make sense what I'm saying here? So what I want you to do is answer one of these questions. Answer one of these questions. Can you see the questions?
Yes.
Okay, so the first one deals with Locke. What are the steps leading from Locke's theory of property to the notion that a system of property will lead to prosperity? I ran through that very quickly. You know, I apologize. You know, I should. And then the other question is the one dealing with Hobbes. What did Hobbes say about the state of nature and how mankind can move from a state of nature to a social contract? So, you know, you could write a long essay on this. I want you I just want to see if what I'm doing in class here, if that sinks in, if you understand that. I need this as a type of feedback. And whatever you're saying, even if you got the right there, a blank, even if you give me a blank, I'm gonna give you 5 out of 10. Okay, I just want this as a feedback to the lecture, because we don't have a normal lecture environment. I got to see where we are in different means. And so I'm giving you 10 minutes to do that, and then send me your answer by whatever your answer is to the WhatsApp group. Any questions regarding these instructions?
Yes, I just wanted to confirm, are we only answering one of these two questions?
Initially, I had planned that you answer 2 of those, but I think it's going to be too much because it's already so late. So you're only going to answer 1 of those. Correct. That's a correct understanding.
Okay, and should we WhatsApp them to you privately or on the WhatsApp group or via email?
You do it privately. You can do it by email. That will be great. That will be the best solution. But because I want to eliminate your possibility of spending too much time on this for your own good, and I want to eliminate the possibility of sharing information amongst each other, I'm just going to give you 10 minutes, okay? And then, of course, when I look at this, I'm aware of the fact that you really had to squeeze this in a very short time, but I'll get a feel of where you're at. So send it to me by email, but you've only got 10 minutes, or send it to me by WhatsApp, and I expect to get it. According to my computer, it's 1943, so you will have to send me something by 1954, either by email or on the WhatsApp. Other questions?
Clear. We'll just leave the questions up like this.
Okay, I'll leave the questions up like that. Good luck.
Thanks.
Sir?
Yes.
Sorry, I was a stupid question. I don't think I was listening. How many words roundabout should this brief answer be?
Yeah, that's great. If you can make it, don't make it too long. If you can do it like 300 words.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yes.
Yes, is it supposed to be in a word form, or I can just type on WhatsApp and send it as a message on WhatsApp?
You can do that as well, yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. I've received one by WhatsApp. That works well. I just typed on the WhatsApp. Okay, it's heading towards 1954. It is 1954 now. So please send me what you have.
Sent on email.
Sent on email, great stuff. Thank you, I'll get it. When you're done, you can log off.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thanks for attending.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I've sent on WhatsApp and you've acknowledged it, so I'm going to drop off now.
Great. Thank you
Thanks.
for that.
Bye.
Bye.
Sent, thank you. Bye.
Okay, I'm acknowledging some others. Thank you. Okay, we all go to log off. I'll see you next week.
That's me. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, cheers, Jack.
Just a little bit delayed, Prof.
Okay. You're still busy. Okay, I'm logging off. Send me your work.